All right, thank you for that great introduction, Rennie. So a little background on what we're going to talk about today. We're just going to go right into industrial IoT, why it's coming to prominence right now. So taking a look at the macro trends with tailwinds in the industry. And then also we're going to take a look at some specific use cases that we're seeing and why factories and manufacturing really has potential to see a facelift with its R&D, with computer vision, with cobots, and with wearables. So if you've tuned in before, you've probably seen this wheel of IoT digitization. And when we talk, what we're talking about when we talk about IoT, we're talking about broadly computing that's not a laptop, that's not a desktop, that's being done in asset-heavy industries. So you can see IoT is being applied to construction, manufacturing, healthcare, a number of industries. And this is how I generally think about the market landscape, especially for the startup markets. You can see that these stack, so to speak, going all the way from software to connectivity, all the way upstream or downstream, depending on how you think about it. At the very bottom, we'd have machine learning and predictive analytics and cybersecurity, the most abstracted away types of startups. So why are we talking about the future of factories at all? Well, it really does begin with industrial IoT and how IoT has come to prominence. A lot of this is thank you to the smartphone revolution, which has brought down sensor costs, computing costs, networking costs, microcontrollers, really you name it in the hardware world, and it's been completely transformed by the smartphone era. And what that has done is it has permitted new computing embedded devices to be attached in industrial contexts. And what that's meant for at least the startup world has been a lot of funding. And you can see how deals have ticked upwards over time, reaching a maximum around 2016. And so far in the last year or two, it's been a slightly downward trend as far as deals. But if you compare it to, say, 2015, where the deal count was about the same, we're actually seeing vastly more dollars going into industrial IoT startups. So as the space has matured, you're seeing more middle stage deals, less early stage deals. And what that means is, in general, is this: you're seeing $769 million invested Q1 18, as opposed to just 496 that we saw back in 2015. So there's still plenty of money flowing into industrial IoT, and with that, there's plenty of mind share going to it as well. So you can see how C-suiters. This is a look at how publicly traded companies are talking about certain keyword mentions on earnings transcripts and earnings calls. And you can see, compared to some other fairly well-known emerging technologies like AI or blockchain, IoT is right up there. A lot of people are thinking about how digitization is going to change their industry. And specifically, the industries that are thinking the most about it and are actually adopting IoT the most is industrial manufacturing. You can see here in the survey that Capgemini did, the most adoptive organizations are industrial manufacturing, and actually far and away ahead of what's average adoption for IoT. And very curiously, it's ahead of some of those other asset-heavy industries like automotive, energy, and utilities. And it's that whole point actually brings up why we're talking today about the future of factories. You know, they're the ones that are actually bringing this digitization to bear. So what's also going on in the startup market world is that there is an uptick in M&A going on this year. So if things continue at the same run rate, we're about ready to see 30 or so industrial IoT exits this year, which would probably surpass 2016's record year. And just some notable exits to mention. Logarithm very recently by Thoma Bravo, PE Group, but some other ones that are worth highlighting for sure. Enlighted by Siemens, which does digital sensors for HVAC and commercial spaces. There's Nokia, which is actually totally wound down its WeThings and consumer IoT to really focus on enterprise communications hardware. And they bought Space-Time Insight. You can see $54 million of total disclosed funding is a significant amount. Another interesting exit that happened back in April was Mobile Industrial Robots getting bought by Teradyne. You might know Teradyne as the maker of Universal Robots, very popular, almost off-the-shelf cobot arm that's extremely popular within the startup world. There's RT Tech Software, a notable manufacturing analytics platform by Aspen Technology. Argus Cybersecurity, very interesting one by Continental, the German manufacturer of auto parts. So really showing you what's possible with the M&A momentum. And this is not even to mention some of those big ticket acquisitions that we saw at the end of 2017. So Granular by DuPont for over $300 million, as well as Blue River Technologies, computer vision for agricultural robots, bought by John Deere in a relatively similar span of weeks, and really brought some momentum going into 2018. So shifting gears to what the factory of the future looks like, if digitization is being brought so fast to the factory, what's this going to mean? And we've actually done this report not long ago that I highly recommend you take a look at. I looked at all sorts of ways that the factory is being transformed, all the way from the planning and R&D steps, all the way through the future of supply chain and warehousing and delivery, like you might see with the unmanned trucks. So there's digitization being brought all over the place, and you can see there's some links here for you to click on and reach that report, which we're gonna take a look at certain sections of right now. So first, a lot of manufacturing organizations don't get credit for being R&D innovators. So you can take a look here. Manufacturers are among some of the top R&D spenders. Take a look at Samsung, Intel, all the way down through Johnson & Johnson or General Motors. I mean, they're spending billions and billions of dollars each year to develop new products. And this is across drugs, technology, aerospace, and many industries. And one startup that's trying to bring better digitization to the process of R&D is Citrine Informatics, a really interesting company that uses machine learning to mine vast quantities of data, and they look at material science, chemicals, and processes so that manufacturing organizations can actually tighten that iteration loop and bring products to market faster. Right now, the material science aspect is a very time-consuming and also monetarily expensive part of the process. Better data, better use of that data with machine learning will definitely help close that loop. A different lens to look at digitization broadly is with computer vision. And one big use case that I've seen is with scanning warehouses, scanning defects for QA. If you look at the Future Factors report, we go into some other ones. But one that's a really interesting company named to check out is Aquify. They really do 3D vision specifically for logistics and manufacturing organizations. You can see some pretty prominent VC investor names like Benchmark, Plug and Play Ventures, not to mention In-Q-Tel, the CIA's arm for investing in the startups. And really what they're looking at using fixed and handheld scanners, they're going to take a look at product dimensions. They're going to count the numbers of boxes in a pallet, inspect the quality, and scan the actual barcodes, basically automating away what used to be very much a pen and paper sort of job. Another big trend that I am extremely focused on, and I think we'll have more content coming up, is around cobots, which are collaborative robots. So similar to what I was saying with the smartphone revolution, it's actually coming to the world of robotics as well. So more sensors, cheaper sensors, better networking has made cobots a thing, and only since around about 2010 or so. And that means that people can work alongside cobot arms, whereas previously with industrial robotics, they're so dangerous that they're often caged and would actually seriously injure somebody if they were to collide. No longer is that the case, and you're starting to see some really interesting shapes, sizes, and intelligences being brought to the world of industry. So on the far right, you can see industrial robots, very much commonplace in auto production. They've been doing these dangerous jobs since at least the 60s. And you probably recognize them. You're often not going to be a human alongside them. But you can see with HEVs and with cobots, there's people in their environments. So Auto Motors, the subsidiary of ClearPath, you can see on the left, they're just doing material transport within a shop floor or a warehouse. People can be in the mix there, and it'll stop and respond accordingly. Similar one, like I said before, with Universal Robots. You can see their arm here. I think this is a picture from Voodoo Manufacturing. You can see that they're using a cobot arm to do the manual process of taking a build plate out of a 3D printer. And like I said, there's plenty of startups that are using this specific brand of off-the-shelf cobot arm. Really, the hardware for it has been commoditized. In a way, this company Teradyne is the pick and shovel for the startups that are trying to write better vision software and do specific industrial use cases, such as Ready Robotics, doing material transport from a forklift to another industrial process. Right Hand Robotics trying to do something similar for picking inside e-commerce warehouses. And really what's also an interesting thing to watch is how the traditional players have responded to this cobot revolution. So you can see the biggest names in the robot world like Yaskawa or Fanuc or ABB. All these are starting to respond to this cobot wave with their own versions of it. And so this is a trend that I'm very much eager to watch. And then finally, one last area where I'm starting to see more digitization go on is with wearables. So measuring human capital is often very difficult. Getting the tasks to be counted properly, and not to mention the work to be safe, is extraordinarily difficult in industrial environments. And one company that's actually made some headway doing this is Exo. So you can see here's a picture of them being used at the Ford Motor Company plant in Michigan. And really what this does, without any real true IoT going on, they really just are an exoskeleton for workers who are doing highly repeatable tasks with a lot of stressful motions. And I've heard and read good things about how that's being implemented. And you can see this is a public company at this point, but maybe a similar strain of IoT-laden wearables is with StrongArm Technologies, which has raised about $3 million. You can see StrongArm has an IoT sensor that will actually capture in real time ergonomic risk factors. And really what this does, like all the technologies that we're talking about, is it's bringing awareness in real time of what's going on in an industrial environment. And this can run the gamut from the actual machine sensor all the way down to the people working on the shop floor. And so that's really what the future of the factory is about. There's tons of other areas that I haven't even discussed today, but are inside this report that I just mentioned before. So here's some links to that. And if you want to use your CBI subscription to take a look at some of these other areas and poke around, we have the IIoT collection, we have trends, we have reports, and we have some profiles. Okay, so that is mostly it of what I have prepared for you. So if you have questions, please hit me up on Twitter. I'm at npapag. You can drop me an email too. But let me see if I can answer some of the questions that have rolled in. There's been a couple, so just give me a moment to take a look and get something ready for you. Okay, someone's asking, of course, related to blockchain, how are blockchains used in industrial settings? Right now, it's almost not at all. But I do talk about this in the Future Factors report at some length. I think what is interesting and has a lot of potential is the idea of almost replacing enterprise resource planning by just having perfect visibility atop a decentralized ledger of some sort. Right now, I think I read that on average about 100 ERP softwares are being used. There's not always interoperability, which is, of course, a huge issue and one of the big hyped areas where blockchain can make a difference. But currently, there isn't really good, aside from pilots being done, there isn't really a blockchain being done here, and so far remains to be seen and proven. Let me take a look at another question here. What are the jobs of the factory of the future? Well, that's quite a broad one, but I think what I've noticed anecdotally is even though people are talking a lot about long-term automation of jobs, I've seen over and over again there's tons of skill shortages, especially where people are trying to apply robotics. A lot of manufacturing organizations, construction organizations, a lot of dirty jobs are just not seeing the people going into them anymore. And thus, for the short term at least, it seems like these areas, if given more technology, if given more worker augmentation, could actually see significant growth. Right now, sometimes the people are the bottleneck for industrial organizations to grow. Let me see if there's another question here. What is the core requirement for industrial IoT application? I would say the core requirement is an internet connection and hardware of sorts. That's generally how I define it. I think a core requirement, like more philosophically, what is core, what is being used, I would say, having insights on your machines, using industrial IoT retrofits or newer machines that are linking up your PLCs and actually just having data on your machines is probably pretty normalized now, not at all a strange thing, maybe even table stakes in certain manufacturing areas. Let's see, what are you seeing about integration between the industry and the agriculture? I would say that you're going to see more and more interest along agriculture. I mean, the use cases are very specialized. So, like I mentioned before, granular and Blue River Technologies were pretty significant, notable acquisitions last year with a pretty big price tag. Those companies were not very mature at all and were acquired for significant sums. And I think you're going to start to see more Silicon Valley style companies come along that are going to try to do similar things. And while the use cases are totally different, like you're not going to have Blue River's plant sensing computer vision being applied to plucking defects from things on a line, I think you are going to see similar concepts being shared between those successes. I also think you could see maybe more interest coming from tractor makers, maybe just some similar use cases between tractors and cars and automakers, and then also just general supply chain innovations. So either a sensor that sits with the crate of goods. Doesn't really matter a ton between agriculture, say that, and aluminum. Obviously, there's different needs for temperature and humidity, et cetera, but these devices are getting rapidly cheaper and more commoditized, and really what's making a difference is connectivity, better software, better visibility, interoperability, and the stuff that startup innovation is typically good at. 3D printing's role in Industry 4.0. How do you see 3D printing affecting manufacturing in the future? I did not talk a ton about 3D printing today, and I do think it's going to be a significant area where you're seeing the future of smaller batch, more mass customized stuff being done. I do talk a lot about this in the Future of the Factory report, so you should definitely check that out. And I think the biggest industrial manufacturing groups are very, very serious about additive's potential. I mean, right now we're talking 0.3% of all manufacturing or something along those lines as far as additive goes. But I think you're going to start to see more than just aerospace parts being done. You're going to see significant mass customization in everywhere from consumer goods like shoes all the way through to technologies in your hands like the future. We've actually taken a look at some of Apple's patents using 3D printing for bulk metallic glass. So electronics is another one. Basically anywhere you're going to be doing manufacturing, a layer by layer approach can be done in the prototyping phase. It can be done at scale maybe in decades from now. I really do think it's a related area and definitely is part of what I consider industrial IoT. Let's see. Are any of these elements of the manufacturing process in the factory of the future particularly well suited for development in New York City? What's interesting? I am actually coming at you live in sunny New York City, and I'm trying to think of some areas that would be particularly useful. I think additive is one. I mean, New York is home to many additive companies, including what I consider an alma mater of mine, MakerBot, but there's Shapeways. There's plenty of others that are actually taking advantage of the space advantage of additive. You can put them on racks like Voodoo Manufacturing is. They're over in Bushwick, and there's plenty of other remixes that are happening. As far as a hub, I mean, New York serves both, as a commercial hub for shipping as well as actual road and ground delivery. So I think there's just unlimited potential. I think with usually the squeeze in New York is real estate, and what the factory of the future is doing is more with less in every dimension. So it wouldn't surprise me if places like New York that have maybe Jersey or Brooklyn, where there's a lot of manufacturing industrial activity, I could see those areas as some of the first and biggest adopters for sure. Have you seen API? Have I seen APIs being used / prevalent in future factory devices, cobots, wearables? Certainly with robots and cobots. Getting those basically hooked up onto the systems that you use, be it SCADA or industrial IoT. There's a variety of ways that you can plug in the data. If you look at articles from, say, automation world, there's tons of press about how that is going down. As far as the other areas, I'm not so sure. But I think especially for just basic digitization, we're still seeing many especially like mom and pop or family-owned small and medium-sized factories. They're still not living in very much of a connected world when it comes to their machines being optimized and things like that. Where GE Predix and a lot of these big names have gone into is some of the more Fortune 500 names. The family-owned factory has yet to be completely digitized. You might see companies like Odin Technologies trying to bring digitization using more or less a Raspberry Pi and a SaaS platform just to help out those types of businesses. And I think there's still plenty of ways to go to bringing OEE, basically bringing lean manufacturing to small and medium-sized factories, because A lot of them are just living in the past, in the sense that you plan for capital goods to last you decades. You know, the way you amortize these things, you're not really planning to add more digitization ever, because in truth it didn't exist until roughly 10 years ago, and you weren't really thinking about that. So that's in part thanks to the smartphone revolution, industrial IoT revolution. There's just newer things that can be done that really weren't possible before. I think that's definitely a trend worth watching, seeing how it plays out, especially in the small, medium-sized factories, because that will be the ultimate test, you know, of improving lean manufacturing, supply chains, and just industry in general. Is there a different advanced manufacturing startup landscape when it comes to targeting middle market manufacturers? I think certainly. You know, we've actually put out, I have a separate advanced manufacturing map, which includes stuff that doesn't have an internet connection. So that's kind of the signifier of IoT. Does it have an IP address? Does it have some sort of sensor? It can be wired, it can be wireless, it doesn't matter, but that's kind of the important signifier for IoT. But advanced manufacturing encompasses more of the 3D printing, more of the things that are innovative but not necessarily IoT. When it comes to the startup landscape, there's similar names, but not all entirely the same. Okay, so finally, and we'll wrap up with this, what bottlenecks to industrial IoT adoption are you seeing? For example, do the IIoT tech companies have the right detailed application knowledge to gain the confidence of their customers? You know, in general, from what I've read and heard, the biggest bottleneck is trying to do too much. A lot of platforms promise the world and don't work for the more niche area. I mean, no two factories are exactly the same, but they're fairly similar. So if you're tackling just manufacturing, you're probably going to have more success than if you were just doing anything industrial related on a SaaS platform, and actually deriving insights from the data. Is a really important aspect to the world of IoT. So structuring it properly, making sense of it, all that stuff takes a lot of time, and doing too much can definitely be a problem for that. Okay, so I gotta run. We are a little bit over time for what we were shooting for, but I do love this stuff. Industry 4.0 is an area I've covered in detail for almost 3 years at this point. So please hit me up on Twitter. That's where I'm most active in thinking about this, but send me an email too, drop me a line, and I would be happy to try to answer your questions or just engage in some discussion, because I actually think this is a very impactful industry that's not getting enough limelight at all, but I think the narrative of disruption and also of digitization is coming to industry. And people are starting to really pay attention to it because of the massive leverage. Improving 1% of a factory's OEE is millions and millions of dollars saved, that kind of leverage is at the core of why people are interested in technology, Silicon Valley, and all that. And I think you're going to start to see a tighter marriage between the two. If you take a look at exits or startup funding, that's kind of backing me up right there. So I'll leave it there. But yep, please do send me your questions and thoughts, and I'll be happy to talk to you. Until then, and until the next, I'll sign you off. But thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day.